welcome. And I really want to talk about succulents. At the plant sale last year, I had some people ask if we're going to be working on talking about succulents, if we're going to offer any, and we are. So I just want to kind of go over what it is, how we decide what it is, dividing and propagating, making your plan, making it fun, and just some fun ideas. Next slide. And here's our shameless plug. We have our Master Gardener plant sale coming up in May on the 11th, 8 to 3. We're going to have all kinds of awesome goodies, including succulents. And there's your little QR code there if you need more information. So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Alice. So what is a succulent? I mean, the basic definition is it's a drought-resistant plant that's adapted to dry, arid environments. They store water in their leaves, stems, and roots. They appear really fleshy. They thrive on neglect and dry soil. They store their own water. This doesn't mean we can't neglect them, but we can a little bit. And then cacti are also succulents. So all cacti are, but not all succulents are cacti. So we've got some indoor and some outdoor varieties. So on the left side, we've got a sedum, and we have more of a ground cover. So some of the outside varieties can get pretty tall, up to 3 feet. And then on the right side, probably the most recognizable of the family is your hen and chicks. That's the hen. And one of the neat things about these, they're so pleasing to the eye. They have the geometry, the repetition, and they just look so pretty as they go along. So a recipe for success when you're working with succulents, whether you're inside or outside, is your 50-50 mix. Your 50-50 soil and the other half with coarse sand, pumice, or perlite, because you want to have really good drainage. A couple of cool facts. Most of the succulents that we see here in the United States for sale are going to be from Africa, Mexico, Central America. We have cacti here. California and Arizona are where they come from when you see the little cacti and the big ones at the nurseries. And hardy sedums come from Japan and the Himalayan mountains. And then some things come from the Mediterranean. Kind of a neat thing about succulents in general is there's a reduced risk of attracting pests or becoming overgrown. I know Sarah has a pretty good sized Christmas cactus at her place, but for the most part, most of these that are smaller have the segments grow pretty small and they take their time growing. And there's some medicinal. We've got aloe vera and agave. Aloe vera is medicinal and agave is a natural sweetener. So let's go to the next slide. So we've got some different steps here if you want to propagate at home. That top left, that's a hen and chick in a pot. So we've got some babies. The hen sends out the babies on the stems, or if you have some other succulents, it's pretty easy. You can just clip off or twist off gently one of the leaves, one of the segments, and then you'll have your soil, and you just lay the leaves right down on top. You're going to want them to dry 2 to 3 days out of the sunlight. And then you can get everything in there. I do use honey as my rooting hormone. And that's what I do. There's some other options you can look at online, but it's pretty easy. I always have water and honey around here. So you'll boil up your water, put a tablespoon of honey in there. I'll let it cool off, put it in a jar, and just put it in the cupboard for a couple weeks before I'm going to get ready to do some propagating and do some dividing. The chicks that come out from the hens, I mean, you can clip those off at the stem. Those you can just lay down right on top of the dirt too, and they're going to root the same way. And then you'll want to do a light drink of water every 2 weeks. Leaf cuttings, depending on what time of year it is, could take 2 to 3 weeks to root. So you have to be patient. Keep them away from direct sunlight while they're working on getting established. And then when you start seeing the new little nodules and leaves coming up and segments coming up from them, then you can move them into the sun. Next slide. So some really good succulents for beginners. I just love succulents. A few reasons. They're pretty easy to take care of. They make a great gift. You can have a one of your children or grandkids, they can have a succulent at their house or at your place and take care of it and feel successful with it and proud of it. So we've got the jade plant on the left. Now this is a blooming jade plant. Maybe you've had already have one of these at your house, and you've had it a while and it hasn't bloomed yet. They do take quite a while to mature to bloom. The kalanchoe, we see these at the nursery all the time here, right? And the flower shop, they do gifts. If you can believe this, this is actually considered a weed in some countries. They just think of it as a nuisance. And aloe vera comes in different sizes. Obviously, they start pretty small and then they grow up to be pretty good sized. And then I've got a Christmas cactus on that side there on the right. Super, super easy to take care of all of these. And again, you might already have something like this at home, and super easy to take care of. Next slide. All right, a couple other things. The snake plant, there's so many varieties of the snake plant. They come in different widths of leaves, and some of them get pretty tall and some stay a little shorter. And then that string of pearls. One thing that's kind of neat is when you're putting your plants together, if you have a project or an idea, is thinking about different heights, and if you want something to spill over out of your project, and different textures, kind of be thinking about what you want to do. Next slide, Alice. Thank you. So you're gonna make your plan. So check your cupboards, Goodwill, garage sales. Maybe your neighbor has some pots they don't want or containers you like. Everything you see here on the left, for me, is stuff I picked up at Goodwill. And then in the middle are just some of the different succulents I have. And I want you to take special note of the middle right. It looks like stones. It's kind of a neat one. They call it living stones. They resemble cloven hooves. Those really don't get very tall at all. They're very low, but they add some interest. I hadn't been able to find any around here. I just found some here a week ago, so I wanted to get some of those. And then on the right side, everything in that picture is totally fake. Everything. So many of the stems and the faux flowers and plants they have now at the craft stores look so real. So if you can't have a real succulent at your desk at work, or it's not in a place where you can water it a lot, you can always go with faux, because faux is fantastic. Next slide. So I'm going to go into like just getting one planted and getting one ready to have in my house. So you'll want to wash your hands, wash your workspace, wash your tools. I use a countertop in my kitchen, or I work outside. So I have some tools that I use. I have a small trowel and I have a big one. Big one if I'm going to work in my yard, a little one for working at the counter, a bowl or container to mix your soil up. And then I use a soup spoon for topping off if it's a small container. Tweezers are good if you want to use those, if you need to. And then just kind of get all of your supplies in one place. Your plant, your supplies for planting, and then that way you'll have everything in one place. Next slide. So I picked out this aloe vera and this cutie container. It's an ice cream cone. It's a false growth ice cream cone that I think you can typically throw in the oven and bake a cake in. But I picked it up for $1. I thought it would be so cute with this in it. So I get my container washed up. I take a look at my plant and I'm going to inspect it. So I looked at it before I purchased it. It looks healthy and full. There's a few probably broken leaves, or maybe a dead leaf or two in there, probably from transit. So I'll get in there and I'll get those out of there. You can use your fingers or you can use tweezers to take that out. Next slide. So I'm mixing my soil and my perlite, and then I'm going to get started on filling up my container. So I have a lot of inside smaller containers without a drain hole. So I want to make sure I get a little bit of water mixed in here too, just a little bit. I'll get it in here, and then I'll go ahead and start filling up my container, and then I'll take my plant out of the nursery pot. So I'll just do a quick look over, flip it over, make sure I don't see anything that I missed. and then I'll get my plants set into the container and I'll get everything topped off. You're going to want the soil at the same line as it is in that nursery container. Next slide. So there's my finished product on the left. And then I'm a big fan of embellishing. I like using colored sand. I like using glass, pebbles, river rock. I decided to throw some white sand on here. Next slide. All right. Oh, okay. I didn't send you my updated version. That's okay. So some of the neat things people are doing are the fairyscapes, or just putting together just a really kind of a neat piece of interest for your patio or your deck or your yard. You can use a pot you have around. The one on the lower left is more of a dish. If you have any leftover saucers and your pot's long gone, great spot to put some goodies in. Just taking it, kind of thinking about what you like and what you want to present. I personally, I like some different heights and some different textures mixed together. The one on the bottom left, it catches my eye because it's got all of the rows of the similar items, and they're kind of starting on your left and working to the right. And then that upper left is a little fairyscape with, they've got some string of pearls hanging over, and they've got some taller items in the back, and they get smaller in the front of their little scape. And then the one on the right, they've got a little walking path in there, and they've just really tricked it out. There's even a little cactus in there too, and some chickens. Next slide. Some other cool ideas. So we've got just in the middle there, just a broken pot or a pot laying on its side. They've got kind of the idea of, oh, my pot tipped over and everything spilled out of it. So just kind of taking that around as a crescent. They've got some, looks like they got some black pebbles in there to really showcase the color of the different succulents. And they've got several different kinds in here. They got their string of pearls, they've got their hen and chicks, and some other items that have different textures and leaf sizes. And then on the left, just kind of like a little bridge, and they got a pretty tall one in the back there. It looks like it's a jade plant, and then they've got some other items in there that are taller and gradually getting shorter at the front and mixing in some cute pebbles. And then the on the right side, you see a lot of ideas where people do strawberries with the 3-pot to design. You can do that with succulents, and they've got some neat things in there. They've got the string of pearls. They've got some other different items in there, all mixed in, different heights, different colors. Next slide. Driftwood and natural wood planters. If you have some pieces around, or you're going to go to the beach and you're like, hey, I never really thought about that. Great place for that. You'll want them to dry out really well. So I have some pieces that I did. They're not in here, but I soaked them in water, like regular water here, for about overnight, and then I had everything dry out. They're in my basement, ready for me to plant here for the plant sale here pretty quick. But typically, you're going to want to try and rinse off that salt water if it's something you pick up at the ocean, and then if you get something at the river, great. I mean, whatever you want to do. If you prefer not to use natural wood, you can pick up resin or cement planters online. There's a lot of different shopping options for that. Next slide. All right, so embellishments, obviously these are optional. Optional. I've done the river rocks and the white pebbles and white sand in the project that you saw for today, sequins, cut glass, and then the baubles, the beads, the glass beads that you can see above there. Just pick whatever you like. Next slide. So they've got a lot of neat fairyscape accessories out there too. You can pick up furniture. They have the little fairies. They have gnomes and some little accents that match whatever motif you're looking for, including the little garden accessories. Next slide. All right, so I did update this. I did not get it to Alice, and I apologize for all of this verbiage here, but I'll just kind of talk through it. So they do require less maintenance than your regular houseplants. A lot of houseplants need watered every week. If your container doesn't have a drain hole in the bottom, you'd want to make sure you don't overwater it. A healthy succulent is going to have really firm, plump leaves and not look wrinkled. When you squeeze a leaf between your finger, it should have very little give. It should be pretty firm. If they're wrinkling up, they are a little thirsty. And when you water, you do not want to pour water directly on your plant. If you have a container and you're going to be watering it, do it to the side, away from the plant, and then maybe 1 to 2 to 3 tablespoons of water, depending on how big your plant is. But if you have a saucer under your plant, you can water from the top and then it will take what it wants from the bottom, or you can just put your water in the saucer, depending on how big your plant is. So usually you don't need to water that much. Maybe in the wintertime, every 3 to 4 weeks. And then don't use a mister on your indoor succulent. They're really going to be bad for your leaves. It's makes them moldy, and then that can go down to your roots and destroy your plant. And they do need a little bit of food. They do need a little bit of food. Periodic feeding. If you have a good, well-balanced water soluble fertilizer, lower nitrogen like 10-10-10 or 5-10-5, whatever the recommended strength is, cut it in half, dissolve it in water, and maybe apply in the spring and summer, maybe every 4 to 6 weeks. So it doesn't need a lot of food, especially if it's a little tiny container. Substitute it for one of your waterings. Next slide. In my resources. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had an updated thing here, but that's all right. There's a lot of neat places that you can pick up some items to decorate, or for supplies to go ahead and plant or pick up plants. These are just some places. This is where I get my stuff, and this is where most of the pictures are my own pictures, and some are from Pinterest. But there's a lot of neat things out there. Mindbodygreen.com is kind of a website too. It talks about how having a plant of any kind, succulent or not, is good for your positive mental health, and also adds oxygen to your home. Next slide. And here's the end where it'll be on YouTube for sure. For sure. So that was a lot about indoor succulents. Outdoor succulents that you pick up with sedums and the hen and chicks are pretty low maintenance. You get your soil ready for them to put them in the ground, and then using the same planting principle, and then just kind of keep an eye on them. They want to be in a place where they're going to drain well. They do great in pots too outside.